Hello, this is Brent Winfield of Advent Message Ministries, adventmessage.com. Today I want to talk to you about one of the most tragic stories in the Bible. It's the story of a man who knew what he ought to do but didn't do it. And it stands as an important lesson to millions of people in our own day who are not willing to obey the truth after it has been revealed to them. And this is the problem with Belshazzar, because God spoke these words to him in Daniel 6:22. He says, "Thou, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this." You see, Belshazzar was the king of Babylon. Babylon was the greatest empire and the greatest city of its day. Belshazzar knew about the madness of his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar. You see, Nebuchadnezzar had walked upon the ramparts of his city, and his heart swelling with pride as he looked across the monuments to his success. He says, "Is not this great Babylon that I have built?" He just couldn't believe anything could happen to great Babylon. So the Lord sent him another dream. God said to him, "You are going to live like a beast in the field and eat grass like the oxen until you learn that the Most High ruleth in the affairs of men." In Daniel 4, we read how it happened. The king went stark, staring, raving mad. They drove him from the palace, and for 7 years, long years, he wandered through the forests and the fields until his hair was like an animal and his fingernails like claws. Then, even as God had said, his reason returned to him, and he returned to the throne a changed man, a humbled man, a converted and surrendered man. Read all about it in Daniel chapter 4. Now, all of this Belshazzar knew he had grown up listening to right there in Babylon. We read in Daniel 5, "Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast to thousands of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein." Well, Belshazzar, of course, did not realize that this was to be his last feast. If he had known that, he would have acted very differently, for he was like many individuals today, in that we expect to get things right before God someday. I don't believe you can find a person on earth who really intends to be lost. Deep in their heart, every individual plans to be right with God someday. Well, we read in verse 5 of Daniel 5, "In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another." There were some invisible beings in the banquet hall that night, as they are in every banquet hall, the silent watchers of God, recording everything that is said and done. These watchers do not argue. These silent watchers, they never try to force us to do what is right, and they're always there. Even when people blaspheme God, the angels do not interfere. The angels just write it all down, record it for the judgment day. So the king called for the wise men, and they came in verse 8. They came in, all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing on the wall, nor make it known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was the king Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. So they sent for Daniel the prophet in the hushed silence of the banquet hall. Daniel the prophet fastens his eyes upon Belshazzar, and as he looks at the young king, he finally says, "O thou king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom, and majesty, and glory, and honor. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts. And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, has not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this. This is the writing that was written. Many tekel upharshid. Friend, this is the interpretation of the thing. God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Thou art weighed in the balance and found wanting. Thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. So the prophet Daniel left the banquet hall, and none too soon, for while he had still been talking to the young king, the armies of the Medes and Persians were entering the city. And in a few moments they burst into the banquet hall, and in that night was Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, slain. Belshazzar was weighed in the balances of God and found wanting, because he knew what he ought to do, but didn't do it. Friends, my prayer is that you will have the courage to do what is right and serve the living God with all your heart and soul. Well, this is Brent Winfield of Advent Message Ministries. I invite you to visit our website for more inspirational video messages, adventmessage.com. And always remember, God loves you. Yes, He really does love you.